Hi there, this is Fiona from IELTS with Fiona and the Members Academy. In this lesson, we're looking at listening and we're going to do a section 2 listening, which is a monologue, just one person speaking. And in this lesson, it's actually a podcast where the speaker gives advice or tips to people who are starting to go running or jogging for exercise. So I chose this one because it's the Olympics week in Paris at the moment, and there are so many IELTS texts related to sport. There are a few about stadiums. There's one about the Beijing Olympic Stadium, and there's one about stadiums in general. There's the last podcast I did, which was all about tennis rackets. There's one about women's football, athletes. I'm trying to do them all during this month of Olympics. So let's get started. The focus of this lesson, if you go to the website and you're in the Bronze Academy, the focus is about matching people in the listening test. Now, normally matching people is in the reading test, but you do get it in the listening. So we're going to look at the tricks and the distractors, which we'll do for all of these anyway. The first set of questions is when you have to choose two letters from a list. So, for example, the first one says, which two problems with some training programs for new runners does Liz mention? So, we're looking for problems. Let's look at this list. There are 5 options. So the first option, there's a risk of serious injury. Secondly, they are unsuitable for certain age groups. C, they are unsuitable for people with health issues. It is difficult to stay motivated. And E, there's lack of individual support. So let's see what she says. There's always the introduction. She says, my name's Liz Fuller and I'm a running coach with Compton Park Runners Club. Welcome to my podcast. If you're thinking about taking up running, I'm here to help. So I think it's interesting that they've chosen a podcast, shows how important podcasts are. And also podcasts tend to give you advice. So there's a lot of language of advice here, but it's never as direct as you think. Normally you learn should is the language of advice. But in this example, you'll see that should is not really used. So when you have to choose those two options, you need to find other language which gives recommendation. So I'm going to read it to you. Remember, we're listening for 2 problems. She says, there are many training programs available online which aim to help people build up to running 5 kilometers. Some of them are great, and thousands of people of all ages are taking part in 5-kilometer races across the country as a result. People like them because they're easy to follow and don't push them too hard. However, so notice the tone of voice changes. They don't work for everyone, especially, and that's a key word, especially, the answer's coming, if you suffer from something like a heart condition or asthma, because they're aimed at people with average fitness and running ability. So these plans are not good for people with heart conditions or asthma. So that answer is they are unsuitable for people with health issues. Unsuitable, they don't work for everyone. The second thing she says, another thing is that everyone is different. And if you have any specific questions related to your needs, there's no one to provide any answers. So that gives us the answer. There's a lack of individual support. There's no one, lack of, to provide any answers. So that's support. Individual questions related to your needs. And that's the same for any kind of course, isn't it? When you follow a course like an IELTS course, if you don't have anybody to answer your questions, then that is a major drawback. So those two problems, C and E in any order, unsuitable for people with health issues and a lack of individual support. Now, the next question is where the advice comes in. The question is, which 2 tips does Liz recommend for new runners? So we're looking for positive things here. A, doing 2 runs a week. B, running in the evening. C, going on runs with a friend, listening to music during runs. And E, running very slowly. Now, before we listen, here's a tip. Now, you will hear the distractors. So in each of these sentences, you're listening for 2 runs a week, in the evening, with a friend, listen to music very slowly. So when you hear each of those things, try to decide which one she's actually saying is good. Here's the lead-in. She tells you the answers are coming. She says, I have a couple of simple tips I always give to new runners. I expect you've been told to run very slowly until your fitness increases. Well, I find that can prevent progress. So you heard the trick. The trick is often, this is what you've been told, but I don't agree. And the but is a well, and it's all emphasis in tone. I find that can prevent progress. So running slowly is not one of the tips. She says you should run at a speed that feels comfortable, but time yourself and try to run a bit faster each time. Listening to music can be very helpful. It takes your mind off things and helps your body get into a rhythm. So music was positive. That is one of the tips. She says, I'd say that it is better than running with a friend. So you hear the word running with a friend, but it's not good. She says music is better. Again, I'd say that it is better than running with a friend, especially as most people are competitive. And that's not what you want when you're just starting. So she introduces the topic, running with a friend, and then dismisses it or rejects it. That's not what you want when you're just starting. She says, I don't think the time of day is important. Some people are better in the evening, so you hear that statement, in the evening, while others are morning people. But remember, she said, I don't think the time of day is important. So it's not running in the evening. But, and the but often leads to the answer, you need to be consistent. So aim to train regularly, twice a week is enough to begin with. So that twice a week, of course, is a synonym for 2 runs a week. Synonyms usually give you the answer. So that's, and the other answer, unfortunately, was not a synonym, but it was a very clear listening to music during runs. D is better than running with a friend. So those are the choosing from a list questions. Now we move on to matching people from a list. There are 4 people Kerry, James, Leo, and Mark, and you'll hear about them in that order. So you'll hear about Kerry first. And you have to match a reason that prevented them, so stopped them from joining the running club until recently. The 3 reasons are A, lack of confidence, being worried, nervous, shy, afraid, anxious. B, a dislike of running. So listen for things like I hated, I didn't like running. And C, a lack of time. So A, not enough confidence. B, not liking running. And C, not enough time. And we're listening first for Kerry. And she says, new members often say to me that they've been put off, phrasal verb synonym, discouraged, prevented from running, either because they lack confidence, it's mentioned there, or they don't have time, or they think they dislike running. So she mentions all 3 in the introduction. Now, Kerry, for example, so it gives you a bit of thinking time. Kerry, for example, joined the club 2 years ago at the age of 40. She had always enjoyed running at school, but she wasn't sure if she'd be able to do it. She was worried about being left behind and being the slowest runner. But she says she was made to feel so welcome that she soon forgot all about that. So Kerry liked running, but she wasn't sure. She was worried. Those 2 key words are symbols or signify confidence. So that is A. Next up is James. And the first line about James had always hated the idea of running, but a friend encouraged him to come along for a taster session, and he hasn't looked back. So that's James, very clearly B. He disliked running. Then Leo. Leo was worried about having to commit himself to training sessions every week and wasn't sure he'd be able to fit training into his busy schedule. So that's his problem. He didn't know if he could commit himself. He had too much work, couldn't fit it into his training, his busy schedule. Now, this means he had a lack of time, and now he feels more relaxed. He looks forward to his weekly. Also says he had a lot of stress at work, but again, they don't relate to those options. So it was a lack of time for Leo. Now, Mark is typical of our new members. He has never considered himself to be a sporty person. It was only when he retired that he decided to take up the challenge of trying to run 5 kilometers. It took him months to find the courage to contact us. Again, he didn't have the courage, which means he lacked confidence. It says it took him months to find the courage to contact us, but felt reassured immediately, as there were other people his age who were only just taking up running for the first time. I'm reading the whole thing out because there's a lot of really good vocabulary in this listening, all about hobbies. And it says here, he was like other people who were only just taking up running for the first time. Take up means to start a new hobby. There's a list at the end I'll give you. So finally, we've matched the people. There's another set of questions, and this time it's multiple choice. There are only 2 questions. And the first one, it's question 19. What does Liz say about running her first marathon? So her first marathon, A, it had always been her ambition. tenses can help here. If it had always been her ambition, it means up until that point, she had dreamed her whole life of doing a marathon. B, her husband persuaded her to do it. And C, she nearly gave up before the end. Another phrasal verb, gave up. Very often with hobbies, you start something and you give up pretty soon. So, she says, my own journey hasn't been easy. I did my first marathon when I was 37 after having had 2 children. My husband had been running marathons for years. Perhaps that's the trick. She mentions her husband. But I never dreamed I'd be doing one with him. So she hadn't thought about it all her life, and the husband did not persuade her. So confirm your answer, the last line. I managed to complete it in 4 hours, but I felt like giving up halfway through. So there's the synonym. I felt like giving up halfway through. It gives you the answer C. She nearly gave up before the end. Last one, question 20. Liz says new runners should sign up for a race. When? So question is, when should they sign up for a race? A, every 6 months. B, within a few weeks of taking up running. Or C, after completing several practice runs. And this is quite confusing, I think. There are a few tricks here. She says, I do think signing up for a race of whatever length is motivating because it's good to have something to work towards and it gives you a sense of achievement. I did my first 10K after only 6 months, which was very challenging and not something I'd recommend. So cross that one off your list, the trick really about 6 months. But after you've been training for a few weeks, it's worth putting your name down for a 5K. So sign up for a race after you've been training for a few weeks. What are the synonyms for that? Well, she says, within a few weeks of taking up running. And that is the answer. It's answer B. There's another trick at the end where she says some people find they only need a few practice runs, but I'd give yourself a couple of months at least. So there's a little trick there with some people need a few practice runs, and the distractor was option C, after completing several practice runs. So it's not C. The answer is B, within a few weeks of taking up running. So that's it. That's pretty easy, I think that one is. And I mentioned that there were lots of phrasal verbs in there that are useful. I'll put the link in the video because I've listed them all on my daily tips. My daily tips focus on aspects of IELTS from all angles, absolutely everything. Pronunciation, speaking, reading, listening, writing, everyday English, English from the news, things like that. But they're all IELTS related. So I'll put that link in the description. If you want the full listening and the tape script and everything that I've been talking about today, then come and join the Bronze Academy, which is the cheapest, the lowest price option on my website. And it gives you, at the moment, in August 2024, gives you already 188 IELTS lessons for $9. So I think you can't say fairer than that. Thank you for listening. Do let me know if you've got any requests or any questions, and I'll be back soon with another sports-related IELTS text. Bye for now. Bye-bye.